Given that in my review for the One Ring I mentioned how I was glad wizards weren't included as a playable option, this video is going to seem a bit strange. However, I thought this would be an interesting subject to explore. Maybe you want to play as one of the blue wizards, or you want to use the rules from the One Ring in your own setting with a little more magic. This could also work really well for Strider mode. You could honestly even play Gandalf and act out his adventures in Dol Guldur. For this, I'll be trying to make something that fits Tolkien's wizards as close as possible, and uses many of the existing rules from the One Ring. Something to keep in mind through all this is that none of this has been playtested. These are just some thoughts on what could work. If you have other thoughts, please share them below. So let's get started. First off, I'm going to have the wizards be a heroic culture, not a calling. After all, wizards have their abilities because they are Maiar. Not just anyone can learn magic, even though I know the Witch King and the Mouth of Sauron were both able to learn some amount of sorcery. I'll start with a quote and a bit about the Istari, who are Maiar spirits sent from Valinor to Middle-earth to aid the people against the growing shadow. They are forbidden to dominate the free peoples or to match Sauron's power with power. With the exception of Elrond, Galadriel, and Círdan, no one knows their true nature. The Istari take on the appearance of old men, however they age very slowly, and despite their old appearance, have strong bodies and highly intelligent minds. Each Istari carries a staff, is associated with a color, and possessed a rank within their order. They are not known to wear armor, but will use weapons when necessary. For a cultural blessing, I will start to introduce some magic. As a servant of the secret fire, they have access to spells, which I'll explain more later, and I will also include a quote from The Hobbit. Below this, I'll explain briefly some things to keep in mind when using magic. Mainly that how magic works should be up to the lore master and the player. However, players should think very carefully before using spells on members of the Free Peoples. Wizards would certainly fit in the frugal category, so I'll write a bit about that here. I think wits would make the most sense to be the highest ability for a wizard, so I'll fill in some possible attributes and derived stats with that in mind. Then, thinking of what I know about the Istari, which is mostly limited to just Gandalf and Saruman, I will pick some skills that seem to fit. The same thought process will be used when picking distinctive features a little later on. For combat proficiencies, I will include an option for staves, which will use the stats of Cudgel. I think this stat will be the one that's used for magic rolls. On the next page, I'll add a bit more about wizard staffs. I will also mention here that the TN spells will be rolled against will be wits. The last few things before moving on to magic is to select some appropriate distinctive features, languages, and write a bit about the names for the Istari. Now we can move on to magic. This is going to be the most interesting and open to interpretation section of the video. Magic in Middle-earth is mostly subtle and quite vague. As far as I can tell, there is no specific meaning behind the colors that go with the wizards. It might have something to do with their rank within the order, or it could have some basis on the powers they wield. Gandalf's magic is most often shown in his control of fire. However, he also uses magic to try to hold some doors shut in Moria, as well as a few other effects throughout the books. We can also see that Saruman's magic seems to be mostly in the power of his voice. He doesn't seem to have any magic with fire, or he probably would have used that against the Ents. Gandalf does also say that Saruman could look like me in your eyes if it suited his purposes. So maybe he can cloak himself in illusion, or at least put a spell on someone so that they can see things differently. We know next to nothing about Radagast, however it is mentioned that he is a master of shapes and changes of hues, and he is much lower of herbs and beasts, and birds are especially his friends. Does this mean that he can take on different shapes, or maybe mold the world around him to some extent? I don't really know. Then there are the blue wizards, that are only mentioned a few times, and we know nothing of the magic they could wield. Other than that, Gandalf mentions being weary after performing a spell. There are also mentions of certain spells taking time to prepare, and it also seems like Gandalf can't create much fire through magic, but can expand it or control it if it's there. There are also some examples of magic that various elves perform in the Silmarillion. I won't include those here, but they could probably fit just fine. With all that in mind, and a few other quotes from the books, we can start to try to create a magic system. For this, I would like it to be quite simple to understand. Even after years of playing D&D, I still find it really hard to explain how a number of spells and spell slots work. So, instead of fussing about with spell slots, I will say that the character can have access to any of these spells. However, casting spells will deal a number of fatigue points, and once your wizard becomes weary, you'll need to have a rest to remove those fatigue points. I think it would make sense to include that a player can take multiple rounds to prepare a spell. For each round spent preparing, you can gain an extra d6. Also, in here, I'll add some extra ways to spend superior success, such as to reduce the amount of fatigue points gained, or to target more people with a spell. As for specific spells, I'm only going to include a few here. I don't really want there to be hard spells. Something I really like about the magic in Tolkien's work is that it isn't specific. There's no point where I'm thinking Gandalf should have just cast this spell to save the day. All I know is that he can do some magic, but it often needs materials, like a founding branch or pine cones, and that it can be tiring. I think players and lore masters should work together to come up with magic that seems appropriate to the situation. This could potentially cause some tension between lore masters and players if they don't agree on this, so maybe it is better to have hard spells, but I don't know. Some of the spells I came up with are Master of Shapes and Hues, where you can change the color of smoke or appear to grow bigger, or maybe like Gandalf, you can cause a roaring flood to take on the appearance of riders and horses. Flash of Lightning to deal some damage and make a loud noise, guarding and guiding to help allies, or word of command, which could be quite powerful, and it should be up to the players and lore masters what effects are possible. There are quotes from the books to support each of these spells, but I don't have room to add them and I didn't want to add an extra page. Lastly, we'll need to come up with some cultural specific virtues. I tried to make similar ones to the other cultures, as well as having a good mix of things to help the whole company, as well as more individual bonuses. And there we have it, a complete new heroic culture to try out in the One Ring. If you do happen to use this in a game, please let me know how it goes, or if you have any better or different thoughts than mine, please share them below. I hope you enjoyed this video. It was a wonderful excuse to spend a lot of time rereading passages from the books, and looking through various forums online to try and make this as faithful to the source material as I could. As for what's next, I'm not entirely sure. I might make a more general how to play video, but I also just bought Strider mode. After I've had a while to play around with that, I'll make a video about it. That's all for now, thanks for watching.